Welcome everyone back to my channel. This fairy tale, again, it is 1916, but it's a Russian fairy tale. And it's called Frost. There was an old man who had a wife and 3 daughters. The wife had no love for the eldest of the 3, who was her stepdaughter, but was always scolding her. Moreover, she used to make her get up ever so early in the morning, and gave her all the work of the house to do. Before daybreak, the girl would feed the cattle and give them to drink, fetch wood and water indoors, then light the fire on the stove, give the room a wash, go round the dresses and tidy those, put clothes in order, put everything in order. Even then, a stepmother was never satisfied, but would grumble away at Maria, exclaiming, "What a lazy bones! What a lazy bones! What a shat!" He does say that as well. "Why, here's a brush, and it's out of place. It should not be there. It's out of place. It should be over here. What a lazy bones. And there's something put wrong. All the time. She's never left muck inside my house. Oh, but she has. There's muck there. I see, was constant complaining from the stepmother, even when, clearly, there was nothing there at all. Maria held her peace, but did weep, and she wept a lot. She tried in every single way to accommodate herself to her stepmother, and to be of service to her stepsisters. But they, taking pattern by their mother, were always insulting Maria, quarrelling with her, making her cry. That was even a pleasure to them, it seems. And for them, they lay in bed late, washed themselves in water, got ready for them, dried themselves with a clean towel, and didn't sit down to work till after dinner. Well, our girls grow and grow until they grew up and were old enough to be married. The old man felt sorry for the eldest daughter, whom he loved because she was the first daughter, and she was ever so obedient. She was never doing outbursts. She always did as she was bid. She never uttered a word of contradiction. But he didn't know how he was to help her in her trouble. He was feeble, and his wife was a scold, and her daughters, well, they were just as bad. They were very insulting. Well, the old folk set to work to consider the husband how he could get his daughters settled. The wife how she could get rid of the eldest one. One day she says to him, "I say, old man, let's get Maria married." "Gladly," says he, slinking off to the sleeping place above the stove. But his wife called after him, "Get up early tomorrow, old man. Old man, get up. Harness the mare. Harness the mare to the sledge and drive away with Maria. And, Maria, get your things together in a basket and put on a clean shift. You're going away tomorrow on a visit." Poor Maria was delighted to hear of such a piece of good luck, being invited on a visit, and she slept comfortably that night. Early next morning she got up, washed herself, prayed, got her things together, and packed them up in proper order. And when she was dressed in her best, She looked like a lass, a bride fit for any place whatsoever, completely different to her daily garments where she worked away the day, scrubbing and tidying and dusting. Now she looked completely different, like a new woman almost. It was winter time, right where she was, and out of doors was a rattling frost. Early in the morning, between daybreak and sunrise, the old man harnessed the mare to the sledge and led it up to the steps. Then he went indoors, sat down on the windowsill and said, "Now then, I've got everything ready." "Sit down to table and swallow your victuals," replied the old woman. The old man sat down to the table and made his daughter sit by his side. On the table stood a pannier. He took out a loaf and cut bread for himself and his daughter. Meantime his wife served up a dish of old cabbage soup and said, "There, my pigeon, eat and be off. I've looked at you quite enough. Drive Maria to her bridegroom, old man, and look here, old greybeard, drive straight along the road at first, and then turn off from the road to the right, into the forest, right up to the big pine that stands on the hill, and there hand Maria over to Frost." The old man opened his eyes wide, also his mouth, and stopped eating, and the girl began lamenting. "Now then, what are you hanging your chaps and squealing about? Surely your bridegroom is a beauty, and is that rich. Why, just see what a lot of things belong to him. The firs, the pine tops and the birches, all in the robes of down ways and means that anyone might envy, and be himself a bogatier, a hero of romance." The old man silently placed the things on the sledge, made his daughter put a warm pelissie, and set off on the journey. After a time he reached the forest, and he turned off from the road and drove across the frozen snow. When he got into the depths of the forest he stopped, and made his daughter get out, laid her basket under the tall pine, and he said, "Sit here and await the bridegroom, and mind you receive him as pleasantly as you can." Then he turned his horse round and drove off homeward. The girl sat and shivered. The cold had pierced her through. She would fain have cried aloud, but she had no strength enough. Only her teeth chattered. Suddenly she heard a sound, not far off. Frost was cracking away on a fir. From fir to fir was he leaping and snapping his fingers. Presently he appeared on that very, very pine under which the maiden was sitting, and from above her head he cried, "Oh, art thou warm, maiden?" "Warm? Warm am I, dear Frost," she replied. Frost began to descend lower, all the more cracking and snapping his fingers. "To the maiden," said Frost. "Out thou warm, maiden, out thou warm, fair one." The girl could scarcely draw her breath, but still replied, "Warm am I, Frost dear, warm am I, father dear." Frost began crackling more than ever, and more loudly did he snap his fingers, and to the maiden he said, "Art thou warm, maiden? Art thou warm, pretty one? Art thou warm, my darling?" The girl was by this time numb with cold, and she could scarcely make herself heard as she replied, "Oh, quite warm, Frost dearest." Then Frost took pity on the girl and wrapped her up in furs and warmed her with blankets. Next morning the old woman said to her husband, "Drive out, old greybeard, and wake the young couple." The old man harnessed his horse and drove off. When he came to where his daughter was, he found she was alive, and had a good palissy, a comfy bridal veil, and a pannier with rich gifts. He stowed everything away on the sledge. Without saying a single word, took his seat on it with his daughter and drove back. They reached home and the daughter fell at her stepmother's feet. The old woman was thunderstruck when she saw the girl alive, and the new pelisse, and the basket of linen. "Ah, you wretch," she cries, "but you shan't trick me." Well, a little later, the old woman says to her husband, "Take my daughters too to their bridegroom. The presents he made are nothing to what he'll give them." Well, early next morning the old woman gave her girls the breakfast, dressed them and befitted them as brides, sent them off on the journey. In the same way as before, the old man left the girls under the pine. There the girls sat and kept laughing and saying, "Whatever is mother thinking of? All of a sudden to marry both of us off, and if there were no lads in our village, forsooth, some rubbishy fellow may come, and goodness knows who he may be." The girls wrapped up in pelisses, but for all that they felt the cold. "I say, Prascovia, the frost's skinning me alive. Well, if our bridegroom doesn't come quick, we shall be frozen to death here. Don't go talking nonsense, Mashka. As if suitors turned up in the forenoon. Why, it's hardly dinner time yet. But I say, Prascovia, if only one comes, which of us will you take? Not you, you stupid goose. Then it will be you, I suppose. Of course it will be me. You indeed. There now. I've done talking stuff and treating people like fools." Meanwhile, frost had numbed the girls' hands, so our damsels folded them under their dress, and then went on quarrelling as before. "What, you fright, you sleepy face, you abominable shrew! Why, you don't know so much as how to begin weaving, and, as going on with, you haven't an idea. Aha, boaster! And what it is you know, why, nothing at all, except to go out to merry-makings and lick your lips there. We'll soon see which you'll take first." While the girls went on scolding like that, they began to freeze, in a downright earnest. Suddenly they both cried out at once, "Why ever is he so long coming? Do you know, you turn quite blue." Now, a good way off, Frost had begun cracking, snapping his fingers, and leaping from fir to fir. To the girls it sounded as if someone was coming. "Listen, listen, Prascovia, listen. He's coming at last. And with bells too. Get along with you. I won't listen. My skin is peeling with cold. And yet you're still expecting to get married." Then they began blowing their fingers. Nearer and nearer came Frost. At length he appeared on the pine, above the heads of the girls, and said to them, "Are ye warm, maidens? Are ye warm, pretty ones? Are ye warm, my darlings? Oh, Frost, it's awfully cold. We're utterly perished. We're expecting a bridegroom, but the confounded fellow has disappeared." Frost slid lower down the tree, cracked away more, and snapped his fingers oftener than before. "Are ye warm, maidens? Are ye warm, pretty ones?" "Get along with you! Are you blind that you can't see our hands and feet are quite dead?" Still lower descended Frost, still more put forth his might, and said, "Are ye warm, maidens?" "Into the bottomless pit with you, out of sight, accursed one!" cried the girls, and became lifeless forms. Next morning the old woman said to her husband, "Old man, go and get the sledge harnessed. Put the armful of hay in it. Take some sheepskin wraps. I dare say the girls are half dead with cold. There's a terrible frost outside, and mind you, old greybeard, do it quickly." Before the old man could manage to get a bite, he was out the doors and on his way. When he came to where his daughters were, he found them dead. So he lifted the girls on the sledge, wrapped a blanket round them, and covered them up with a bark mat. The old woman saw him from afar and ran out to meet him, and called out ever so loudly, "Where are my girls?" "In the sledge." The old woman lifted the mat, undid the blanket, and found the girls both dead. Then, like a thunderstorm, she broke out against her husband, abusing him and saying, "What have you done, you old wretch? You've destroyed my daughters, the children of my own flesh and blood. My, never enough to be gazed on seedlings, my beautiful berries. I will thrash you with my tongs. I will give it to you with the stove rake. That's enough, you old goose. You flattered yourself you were going to get riches, but your daughters, they were too stiff-necked. How was I to blame? It was you yourself would have it." The old woman was in a rage at first, and used bad language, but afterwards she made it up with her stepdaughter, and they all lived together peacefully and thrived, and bore no malice. A neighbour made an offer of marriage. The wedding was celebrated, and Maria is now living happily. The old man frightens his grandchildren with stories about frost, and doesn't let them have their own way. The end. So, as you may have gathered, it's kind of like Cinderella. In a way, there are two step-sisters that are not nice, stepmother that's not nice, and they die because they are quite mean. The other survives because she is quite soft-spoken and charming, and Frost takes pity on her. And of course, Frost is the winter, just so you know, but he's like an elemental form, I guess. Anyway, please hit the like, share if you can, it really helps. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.